You're embarrassing this entire family, my mother whispered sharply as I grabbed the bottle of champagne out of my brother's hands, pulling my soaking wet son away from the laughing crowd. The bottle hit the marble floor of the country club ballroom and shattered, sending glass skittering across the polished stone. But the sound was almost swallowed by the roar of laughter that filled the room. It was supposed to be a celebration of my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. A black-tie dinner at Oakmont Country Club that I had personally planned and paid for over the last 4 months. But as always, the attention had pivoted to my older brother Derek, a 42-year-old corporate lawyer who still thought he was the golden prince of the family, had decided that the toast portion of the evening was the perfect moment for what he called a little roast of his favorite nephew. I hadn't been close enough to stop it. I was at the bar coordinating with the catering manager about the timing of the dessert course when I heard the collective gasp, followed by the howl of laughter. I turned around and saw my son Caleb standing in the middle of the dance floor, drenched from head to toe in champagne. He was only 9 years old, wearing the little navy blue suit we had picked out together at Macy's 3 weeks earlier. He had been so proud of that suit. He kept adjusting the pocket square in the car on the way over, asking me if he looked handsome enough for Grandma and Grandpa. Now he stood there, his hair plastered to his forehead, champagne dripping down his face, his eyes wide and glassy with humiliation. Derek was standing a few feet away, holding a phone up, already filming. "Welcome to manhood, little buddy," he boomed in his courtroom voice, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "Every Ashworth man gets baptized in champagne. It's tradition." He turned to the crowd like a showman. "He's gonna be a lady killer. Folks, give him a round of applause." And they did. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my father's business partners. They laughed. They clapped. They raised their glasses to my humiliated 9-year-old child, as if he were some kind of prop in a comedy sketch. That was the moment the floor fell out from under me. I crossed that ballroom without even feeling my feet touch the ground. I snatched the champagne bottle from Derek's hand, and in the same motion, grabbed the phone out of his other hand. I didn't smash it intentionally. I just dropped it. Or maybe I threw it. I honestly don't remember. All I remember is the cracking sound as the phone hit the floor and the second bottle of champagne I knocked off the nearby cocktail table shattering beside it. I scooped up Caleb, who was beginning to cry silently, the kind of crying where the shoulders shake but no sound comes out. And I started walking him toward the lobby. My mother, Linda, intercepted me before I could reach the double doors. Her face was flushed, not with embarrassment, but with fury. She looked past Caleb entirely. Her eyes locked on mine, her voice dropping to that low, dangerous register she had perfected over decades of controlling her daughters in public. "You're embarrassing this entire family. Rebecca, get a hold of yourself. It was a joke. A joke." My voice came out flat. "He's 9. Mom? He is 9 years old and he's soaking in alcohol in front of 100 people. It's champagne. Sweetheart. Not bleach." My father, Harold, had wandered over now, holding a tumbler of whiskey and looking mildly inconvenienced, like I had interrupted his favorite television program. Derek was just being Derek. The kid needs to develop a sense of humor if he's going to survive in this family. I looked down at my son. His suit jacket was so wet it had darkened to almost black. A trickle of champagne was rolling down his cheek that I couldn't tell from a tear. He smelled like a frat house. And his uncle, a grown man with a law degree from Georgetown, had done this to him for content. Derek had already retrieved his cracked phone and was inspecting the damage. "You owe me a new phone," he announced loudly, holding it up so the cluster of relatives could see the shattered screen. "This is the Pro Max. That's $2,000. Becca. Plus, whatever the cleaning bill for my suit is, And an apology to everyone here, because you just ruined Mom and Dad's night. Apologize to your brother. My father's voice had shifted now from inconvenience to command. It was the same tone he had used my entire childhood. The tone that had always made my hands start to shake. Apologize to him. Pay for the phone. And we can all get back to dinner. Don't turn this into one of your moments. Rebecca. I looked around at the ring of faces surrounding me. My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, was shaking her head slowly, like I was the problem. My cousin Mitchell, Derek's best friend since childhood, was already laughing at whatever he was typing into his phone. My mother was staring at me with that pinched, expectant look. To the look that said the correct response was obvious, and I was just being difficult again. Not one of them looked at Caleb. Not one of them asked if he was okay. Not one of them grabbed a napkin or a towel or offered a single human kindness to a crying child. They were all just waiting for me to perform the apology that would let the party continue. We're leaving, I said quietly. If you walk out those doors, my mother said, her voice rising for the first time. You will not be welcome at Thanksgiving. I mean it this time. Rebecca, you have pulled this kind of stunt for the last time. Don't even think about coming to my house for Christmas. Derek added, still holding his phone up. And I want my $2,000 by Monday, or I'm taking you to small claims. I walked past them. I kept walking until I reached the valet, handed over my ticket, and waited on the curb holding Caleb against my hip, even though he was really too old to be held that way. He buried his face in my neck. His little body was trembling. I could feel the wet fabric of his suit soaking into my dress, and I did not care. As we waited, I saw Derek's girlfriend Amber come out onto the portico. She was holding her phone, and she was filming us. She was narrating in that sing-song voice influencers use when they're doing a story time. Oh my God. You guys, you will not believe what Derek's crazy sister just did at her own parents' anniversary party. She attacked him. She literally smashed his phone and left her kid cry it out. Someone call CPS on this lady. I swear to God. I turned my face away. The valet pulled up in my Honda, and I buckled Caleb into the back seat. And I drove out of that parking lot without looking back. I did not drive home. I drove straight to St. Lang, Luke's urgent care, on the east side of town. I carried Caleb inside, still in his wet suit. And I told the intake nurse exactly what had happened. And I asked her to document everything. She took one look at him and pulled us back immediately. The physician on duty? A woman in her 50s, named Dr. Patel. It was furious, in that quiet, professional way that doctors get when they see something they should not be seeing. She photographed his skin, where the champagne had caused irritation around his eyes and on the tender skin of his neck. She made notes about the psychological distress. She gave me copies of everything before we left. She also told me, very gently, that I should consider filing a report with the police. Because what I was describing was assault on a minor. He's his uncle, I said weakly. He's family. Family doesn't do this. Doctor, Patel said. And the courts don't care what the family tree looks like. They only care that a grown man poured alcohol on a 9-year-old for entertainment. File the report. You'll want the paper trail. I took Caleb home. I put him in a warm shower, and he just stood under the water with his arms at his sides, staring at the tile. I sat on the closed toilet lid, and I waited for him to come out. When he finally did, wrapped in a towel, he looked at me with swollen red eyes and asked me the question I have not been able to get out of my head since, Mommy, why did Grandma laugh? I couldn't answer him. I tried. My mouth opened and closed, because anything I said was going to be a lie to protect people who didn't deserve his protection. She laughed really hard, he said. His voice was small. She was pointing at me. Mommy, why would she do that? I pulled him into my arms, and I held on to him. And I said the only true thing I could think of, because she is not a good person. Baby, she's my mom, but she's not a good person. And none of that was your fault. Not one single part of it. You were perfect tonight. You are perfect every night. Are we still going to their house for Sunday dinner? No. Sweetheart, we're not going back there. Not ever. He nodded slowly, as if this was a relief. And that crushed me, more than anything else that had happened that night. A 9-year-old child was relieved to hear he would never have to see his grandparents again. That told me everything I needed to know about the last 9 years of my parenting decisions. I put him to bed with the hallway light on, which he hadn't asked for in 2 years. Then I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table. And I let my phone start buzzing. The texts had been piling up for an hour. My mother, 3 times. My father, twice. Derek, 7 times. Each one angrier than the last. My Aunt Patricia, weighing in with a long paragraph about how I had always been the difficult one, and how I needed to think about what my selfishness was doing to the family legacy. Amber had posted the video on Instagram. It had 600 likes already. The caption accused me of being an unhinged single mother who attacked her own brother in public. My cousin Mitchell had shared it to Facebook. The comments were a pile on. Strangers were calling me unstable. Someone said I shouldn't be allowed to have custody. Someone else tagged my employer, a marketing firm downtown, and suggested they should reconsider hiring people with documented anger issues. I felt my chest get tight. I felt the world shrink down to the size of that phone screen. They were going to destroy me. They had the numbers and the microphone and 5 decades of carefully curated respectability. And I had a 9-year-old in a wetsuit and a medical report nobody had asked to see. I felt exactly the way I had felt when I was 11 years old, and my mother had thrown out my diary because she didn't like what she read in it. Small, outnumbered, wrong for having feelings in the first place. I almost apologized. I almost typed out the words. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. And then I thought of Caleb asking me why Grandma laughed. And something in me locked into place that had never been locked into place before. I put the phone face down on the table. I was about to stand up and get another glass of wine when I knocked a stack of mail off the edge of the table. A large envelope slid out and hit the floor with a heavy thud that didn't belong to a piece of junk mail. I bent down and picked it up. The return address was Whitman and Associates, the law firm that had handled my grandmother's estate when she passed away 4 years ago. I hadn't opened it in months, because the estate administration had dragged on, and I was exhausted with the legal jargon. I tore it open now just to have something to do with my hands. And that was when the ground shifted. My grandmother, on my father's side, a woman named Eleanor Ashworth, who had spent her entire widowhood in a quiet little cottage in Greenwich, and who had always treated me like I was the only grandchild she actually saw, had left me something in her will. Not just the cottage, which I already knew about. She had left me her shares of Ashworth Property Holdings, the family real estate company that my father and Derek ran together. I had known she owned a small percentage. What I had not known, because nobody had ever bothered to explain it to me, was that the percentage she had passed down to me was not small. It was 52%. Controlling interest. In the company that owned my parents' house in Darien, the company that owned Derek's brownstone in the West Village, the company that owned the strip mall Derek used as collateral for his law firm's office lease, and the company that owned the marina where my father kept his precious sailboat, all of it. Every single asset that my father and brother used to lord their status over me at every family gathering since I was old enough to remember. My grandmother had quietly left me the keys to the entire kingdom, and the administration of the estate had been finalized 4 months ago, which meant the shares had been in my name the entire time I had been planning that anniversary party. The letter included a copy of the shareholder agreement. As majority owner, I had the right to call a special meeting, replace officers, and liquidate assets at my discretion, pending a 60-day notice period that had already elapsed. I sat at the kitchen table and I read that letter 4 times. My hands were steady for the first time since I had walked into that ballroom. My phone buzzed again. It was my mother calling. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message I would later listen to, in which she told me, in the coldest voice I have ever heard from her, that I had exactly one chance to save myself. I could come to brunch on Sunday, publicly apologize to Derek in front of the family, to record a video for Amber to post admitting I had overreacted, and pay Derek $3,000 for the phone and emotional damages. If I did that, they would let me back in. If I did not, she said, I was done. I was out of the family. I should not bother coming to her funeral, and I should absolutely not expect a single penny of inheritance when she and my father were gone. Inheritance? That word almost made me laugh out loud alone in my kitchen at 2 a.m. I did not sleep. I made a pot of coffee and I sat at the kitchen table and I started writing a list. By sunrise, I had a plan. At 8 a.m, I called Janet Whitman, the attorney whose name was on the letter. She remembered me. I explained the situation and I asked her, very carefully, to what my options were. She listened without interrupting for a full 5 minutes. Then she said, in a voice that was trying very hard not to sound delighted, Rebecca, you have every option. Every single one. Tell me what you want the outcome to be, and I will get you there. I told her what I wanted. She told me to come to her office at 10. At 9. I called the precinct near Oakmont Country Club, and I filed a police report for assault on a minor. I gave them the medical records from urgent care. I gave them the names of every person who had witnessed it, including people I knew would not testify against my family, because I wanted them in the record anyway. The officer was kind. She told me that whether or not charges were filed would depend on the district attorney, but that my report was solid. At 10, I walked into Janet Whitman's office. By noon, we had drafted the paperwork for a special shareholder meeting. A notice of termination of my brother's employment as Vice President of Operations at Ashworth Property Holdings. A formal notice to my father as acting CEO that he would be replaced at the upcoming board meeting, and an intent to sell filing for 3 specific properties, including my parents' house and my brother's brownstone. At 2, I called a forensic accountant Janet recommended to audit the company books. She had a hunch, based on what I had told her about Derek's lifestyle, that there would be something there. There was. Within a week, we would discover that Derek had been quietly funneling company rental income into a personal account he had labeled bonuses that were never approved by the board. A small but consistent embezzlement scheme that had been running for almost 3 years. At 4, I called Amber's employer, a skincare brand that prided itself on its family values and its anti-bullying campaigns, and I forwarded them the Instagram video along with the medical report. They fired her before dinner. At 6, I called a reporter I knew from a local nonprofit gala who covered civil court filings, and I gave her a heads up that there might be an interesting shareholder story coming out of a well-known local real estate family in the next few weeks. She told me she would be watching. I went to bed at 10 that night, and I slept for the first time in 48 hours. The bomb dropped 3 days later. I was in a meeting at work when my phone started vibrating in my bag, so violently I had to step out to silence it. 17 missed calls. My mother, my father, Derek, my Aunt Patricia, my Uncle Gregory, my cousin Mitchell, and a text from my father that read, in all capital letters, "What have you done? Call me immediately. This is insane." I did not call him. I went back into my meeting and I finished presenting my Q3 marketing report. And then I went out to lunch with my colleague Maria and I ordered the steak. When I finally checked my voicemails at 3 in the afternoon, I listened to all of them. My father sounded like an old man for the first time in my life. His voice cracked. He kept saying, "Rebecca, there's been some kind of mistake. The paperwork is wrong. Please call me so we can straighten this out. I don't understand what's happening." My mother was screaming. She called me a viper, a snake, an ungrateful ingrate, a whore, a disgrace. She told me I was killing them. She told me I was going to hell. Derek was the most interesting. Derek was calm. Derek was using his lawyer voice. He said he was willing to sit down and find a reasonable resolution, and that if I was having a mental health crisis, he would understand, and we could figure out a way to unwind this misunderstanding without any formal proceedings. He was scared. I could hear it under the lawyer voice. He was terrified. Aunt Patricia left the longest message. She told me that my grandmother would be ashamed of me. That Grandma Eleanor had trusted me with those shares to be a good steward of the family legacy, not to destroy it in a fit of pique. That's the word she used. Pique. My grandmother had left me those shares in a will signed 10 months before she died. I had visited her at the hospice 3 times in her final month. I was the only one who had. Derek had been too busy. My parents had been on a cruise. She had held my hand and told me that she saw what was happening in our family, that she had seen it her entire life, and that she was sorry she had not done more to protect me when I was young. She had told me she loved me. She was the only person in that entire family who had ever said those 3 words to me without immediately attaching a condition. Aunt Patricia had no idea what Grandma Eleanor would have thought. But I did. I sent exactly one reply. I sent it to the group text with my mother. "Father and brother, you told me I was embarrassing the family. You told me I was out? You told me to pay or leave. I am honoring your wishes. Ashworth Property Holdings is being restructured under its new majority owner. Derek is terminated for cause. Effective immediately. The Darien House and the West Village brownstone are being listed for sale. You have 60 days to vacate. All further communication goes through Janet Whitman at Whitman & Associates. Do not call my phone. Do not come to my home. Do not approach my son. I have filed a police report regarding the assault at the anniversary party, and a restraining order is being drafted. Goodbye." Then I blocked all 3 numbers. The next 6 weeks were the quietest 6 weeks of my adult life. Janet handled everything. The restraining order was granted. The audit uncovered Derek's embezzlement, and rather than press charges, I offered him a choice. Either sign an agreement repaying the stolen funds in exchange for my silence, or face criminal prosecution. He signed. He also resigned from the New York State Bar's Ethics Committee the following week. Quietly, without explanation, my parents tried to contest the will through their own attorney. They lost. Grandma Eleanor's lawyer had been thorough. The will was ironclad. She had even left a sealed letter to be read, only if the inheritance was contested, in which she explained in plain language that she was leaving everything to Rebecca because Rebecca was the only grandchild who had ever treated her like a human being instead of a wallet. Janet read that letter aloud in the deposition. She told me my father cried. Derek's girlfriend, Amber. I tried to sue me for tortious interference for contacting her employer. Her lawyer dropped her case after reviewing the video she had posted, which was itself defamatory. The video came down. She blocked me, which was a gift. On the morning the Darien house closed, I drove up and parked across the street. I didn't get out of the car. I just watched. There was a U-Haul in the driveway. My father was loading boxes into the back. He looked older than I had ever seen him. My mother was inside the house still. I could see her through the bay window, standing in the middle of the empty living room, her arms wrapped around her own shoulders. For one brief second, I felt something soft in my chest. The ghost of the daughter who used to set the table for Sunday dinner and hope her mother would notice the napkin folds. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. Caleb was in the back seat, reading a graphic novel. He had grown an inch in the last 6 weeks. He was humming something under his breath. His eyes caught mine in the mirror and he smiled. "Are we going to see the new place today?" "Mom, with my share of the liquidation proceeds, I had bought a proper home. A real home. A 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet town up in Litchfield County. In a school district where nobody had ever heard the last name Ashworth. It had a fenced yard and a tire swing and a kitchen window that looked out over a dogwood tree. Caleb had already chosen his bedroom. He wanted to paint the walls dark green. "Yeah, buddy," I said, and I put the car in drive. "We're going home." I did not look back. I did not slow down at the driveway. They had wanted a show. They had wanted a spectacle. They had wanted a joke at my son's expense that they could tell at Christmas for the next 10 years. They got something they would be explaining at every Christmas for the rest of their lives. Just not the story they thought they were going to tell. And my son, who had once asked me why his grandmother laughed, he was humming in the back seat on the way to a house where no one would ever laugh at him again.